Well, hello out there everybody. I'm excited to be filming another video, and I'm trying very hard to look at the camera lens and not at myself. We'll see how I do. So I'm going to do the follow-up video on the Ontograph that I said I would do if there was interest, and I'm excited to report that there was. You know, I assumed that at least a couple people would throw me a bone and say, sure, let's see what the Ontograph is all about in detail, but delightfully surprised to see that there's actually quite a bit of interest, and I'm excited to talk about it a bit more. So in a moment I'll get my head out of the way and we can look at that model. And I'm doing this unscripted. I want to really thank everybody for all of the feedback. The response has been overwhelming. You know, my motivation initially was just to make some videos because it seemed like Jennifer's fans would like to see me doing something, and I aim to please. But I have to confess, it's sort of addicting and a lot more fun than I thought it would be, and especially because you all seem interested to hear me talk about the things that I like to talk about. So that's pretty cool. And I'm not going to promise never to script anything ever again. I think there's a time and place for that. Like maybe I'll write a poem one day and I'll want to read that exactly. But I am hearing what everyone's saying about it being authentic and not like a speech and not like Obama reading off a teleprompter. So I think that if I do script things in the future, what I'll do is I'll just memorize it properly. And then just do a paragraph at a time and actually do some editing. And I actually, you know, I want to thank you guys because I've been working on a project actually for my company where I want to create a series of like weekly leadership message videos for all of our contributors. And I've been struggling with it because it takes me too long to do. And after doing the one video that I scripted and took forever, and then the Bergson video that was a 5-minute video that took 5 minutes, you know, I realized that, I mean, of course everyone on YouTube does this already. They speak authentically, but then they just edit it out, so they capture the snippets that they like. But they keep it tight by doing the right editing, so they get authentic communication, but they also get the focus that they want. Of course, this is a brilliant approach. So I'm guessing that'll be the more common way that I do most videos, and that's how I'm approaching this one. And so without further ado, let's take a look at the Ontograph. Oh, I also wanted to say I appreciate the feedback about lighting. I found a couple of lamps that are right here, and found the light bulbs all by myself. They may be the first 2 light bulbs that I've changed in this house in 5-6 years we've been here. But I was happy to discover where the light bulbs are. Closet all the way upstairs. You guys probably knew that. I didn't know that. It would probably be ideal if I could get my face in the frame while we're looking at this, but that seems sort of complicated at the moment, so I'm just going to do a little bit of pointing when necessary. So, you know, as I said in that other video, this diagram is something that a friend of mine, Peter Koestenbaum, created, and he's a philosopher and a business consultant for leadership, and he calls this the Ontograph, which means map of being, and it's a model of being. In particular, it's a model of what it means to be a human being. And Peter actually calls this a meta model because it's the model from which other models are generated. He also likes to call it a worldview factory. So like, for example, capitalism is a mental model that's sort of like a worldview. You know, it's an interpretive lens. How do you look at the dynamics of social relations? Capitalism is one way that people think about it. Communism is another way that people think about it. It's an alternative, in some ways opposite, worldview. But this model, you know, according to Peter, and I tend to agree, this model supports the origin of both of those. Both capitalism and communism have to deal with the dynamics that are shown here, which is the interplay between the individual and the world system. It's the one and the many. It's one of the most fundamental polarities. So that's one of the reasons why we think it's so cool. And so now I'm just going to talk through what these different elements are. So on the left side, there's a oval, and that represents the individual, like your ego, yourself. And it's on the left and Western side deliberately because Western culture tends to be oriented towards, you know, the individual as the sacred element, you know, kind of the cowboy mentality. And then on the right-hand side, there's a rectangle, and that represents the world system. and that's on the right or eastern side deliberately. Eastern cultures tend to be more oriented toward the, you know, the kind of, I don't know if supremacy is the right word, but primacy of the group and the group's needs over the individual. But what's in the middle is where it gets really interesting. That diamond is the mind, and Peter represents the mind with 4 different points. That's why it's a diamond, and those points are courage, ethics, vision, and reality. I'm not sure if I have to zoom in. I sort of think on a big screen you'll be able to read those. But your mind is the lens. It's the interface between yourself and the world system. And that's the amazing thing about being a conscious being and having the ability to reflect on yourself. Your mind and yourself are not the same thing. Your mind can be aware of what yourself is doing. And it's sort of amazing, and it sounds sort of paradoxical, but it is the reality of being a human being. And so what Peter's model for the mind, that diamond, is sort of, you know, a model within the model, I think is really beautiful. And I have to say, I was talking to this guy for over a year and reading his books and thinking about this and seeing some truth in it before it really sort of clicked how profound this model of the mind is. So actually I am going to zoom in on it just for a bit of focus. The courage, ethics, vision, and reality. There we go. They sound kind of like, you know, big words that rarely get defined precisely, but Peter uses them very deliberately. And the one thing I wanted to say as sort of an introduction is what he's trying to do with this model is essentially distill 4,000 years of the history of philosophy into a single page, which is quite an ambitious task. But the man is well versed in everything from Plato, you know, through Bergson, who was pretty recent, and a whole bunch of other philosophers that I couldn't mention off the top of my head. None of these ideas are original to him. He's pulling from all of this stuff, but this is his way of integrating it. But so the 4 points of the mind here are there different dimensions, they're different capabilities that you have in your mind, and they represent, you know, power centers. Actualizing courage and ethics and vision and reality are ways for you to kind of become yourself and maximize your effectiveness and your power in the world. But they're all also, they're risk factors if they're neglected. What Peter calls the leadership mind is a mind that's capable of holding on to all of these sometimes conflicting dimensions at once. He says this leadership mind is spacious enough to be able to hold on to contradictory ideas. So I'm just going to kind of go around the horn and define those things. Courage, Peter calls courage acting with sustained initiative. You know, courage is being willing to take a risk. It's being willing to act decisively and boldly, and it obviously requires a certain amount of confidence, you know, in the actions that you're going to take. And it can sometimes conflict with reality, for example, because the reality is that there's always danger out there, and there's always the risk that your actions are going to be wrong. And if you focus too much on all of the pieces of reality that could go wrong, it's really hard to be courageous. But on the other hand, if you never look at reality clearly, well, your decisions are not going to be very good. When you try to act boldly, you're going to, you know, your expectations are going to be upset more often than not. And so there's this tension between being open to seeing reality clearly and, you know, being aware of things that, you know, you'd rather not see, but then still being able to act decisively and courageously despite the ambiguity of all of that. You know, so you know, reality is a different kind of capability. That's where we, you know, cutthroat business decisions. The kind of people that are really good at that, they're good at engaging reality. Chess players are dealing with, you know, those kinds of reality decisions. Now, vision, on the other hand, is the ability to see not what is, but what's possible, which again is in conflict with reality. Reality is all about seeing exactly what's there. And vision is about not being limited by what's there. It's about seeing what could be, how things could be different. And so again, it's really hard to do both of those at the same time. And that was the thing that clicked for me finally after talking with Peter about this stuff for a long time. I really began to feel my mind go from one of these modes to the other. Like, I could feel myself when I was in a vision mode, and how I would be sort of creative and wildly idealistic, and how it was such a fundamentally different way of engaging my mind than when I was like working through a business plan and trying to, you know, figure out hiring decisions and think about different risk-reward trade-offs. Like, that's just a totally different piece of the brain, you know. I don't know all about neuroscience, you know, I don't think they have all that figured out, but I bet you that when they do those, you know, those brain scan things, they can see different parts of the brain lighting up when you do these different kinds of thinking. And then, of course, ethics on the left is, you know, is about doing the right thing, you know, which again can be in conflict with reality, and it can be, you know, all of these can, in different contexts, either support each other or work against each other. But one of the big ones is ethics versus reality. It's doing, you know, the right thing versus doing what you think you need to do to protect yourself. And you know, that's just that's a tough tension to balance. But you know, ethics is about caring about other people. You ask the question, what would so for ethics, you ask the question, what would a person who's a better person than I am do in this situation? And for courage, you ask the question, what would someone who's braver than I am do in this situation? For reality, you ask the question, what would someone who's smarter and more knowledgeable than I am do in this situation? And for vision, you ask, what would someone who's greater and has more creativity than I do in this situation? And by asking those questions, you can mitigate the risks of not actualizing those dimensions and increase the probability that you do, and increase what you might call your personal power. But what the ontograph is really about is how the mind is the interface between the individual and the world. So it's about the feedback loop, which is what that red arrow is about. Take a minute to dial in on the feedback loop. So this is where we were talking about, I was talking about in the first video, free will versus determinism. So on the left side, the three words I've got written at the bottom, which are Peter's words. Peter loves to revise his models, you know, kind of in the tradition of a P like me, that's never right. So he's got a zillion different versions of this ontograph. Some of them are more detailed than others. This is sort of the medium granularity version. But free will, power, and guilt are all things that exist on the individual side. So that's where you get to make decisions, right? There's no one else that can decide what I'm about to say except me. You know, even if I'm a slave, it's still my mind's agency over my body is inalienable. You have to threaten me or coerce me or convince me in some way to act. You know, I'll make a decision that I'd rather plow your field than be beaten by you, but it's still my mind controlling my body, and that is the the idea that free will is an absolute. It's not an average. It's 100% you have free will, and that means that you have power to decide. But what comes along with free will, unfortunately, is guilt, because you know that you could have always done something differently, and so as soon as you act, there's this possibility that you'll feel guilty about it, and you have to deal with the fact that it was your choice and not the environment that made you do it. Once you act, now you're interacting with the world system, and you're subjected to a response from that system which is utterly unpredictable and which is completely beyond your control. It's, of course, within your influence, but it's beyond your control. You can influence it, you cannot control it, and it will not be deterministic. Chaos theory and all of that. So underneath world system on the right, we have uncertainty, dependency, and anxiety. The future is always uncertain. How the system will respond to me is always uncertain. And I'm utterly dependent on the system. That's a topic that I think I'm going to get into more in another video, than the notion that despite the fact that we are individuals, we only become individuals through our relationships with other people in the world. I think there's something really deep there. You know, we are dependent on the system around us, and over here we have anxiety, which is different than guilt. Guilt is about dealing with the fact that we have power, and anxiety is about dealing with the fact that we're helpless, that we are subject to the influence of the system that we need but we can't control. So what the leadership mind is all about is actualizing all 4 of those corners of the diamond to iterate through this loop as quickly as possible. And by that I mean you make a decision, you act decisively despite ambiguity and uncertainty, and then you view the response from the world system with no guilt. Like, in order to act, you have to overcome anxiety. In order to respond to the feedback that you get from the world system and make your next action better, you have to deal with the guilt that maybe your first action wasn't as good as it could have been. The trick to that is realizing that your first action is never as good as it could have been. So get over yourself and being worried that maybe you were wrong. Of course you were wrong. You can't help but to be wrong. You know, and that's the whole life is a journey, not a destination. That's, you know, why process is more important than outcome. It's not about not making a mistake. It's about being open to seeing mistakes when they happen so that you can act differently the next time. And then, you know, the one thing I didn't mention is the rectangles around the frame. I can't think of what to call that, but there's kind of several ontographs overlaid on each other, and up at the top it says history, time, and space. And that's just to emphasize that all of this is happening within the context of this massive universe that, you know, that changes. It's not a static system. So that's one of the things that I love about this model. It recognizes that there are no static answers. That's what that history and time and space, I think, is there to represent. Okay, so that was my summary of the Ontograph. I just want to take 1 second at the end here to reiterate that I did not create this model. I was looking at the camera for a second there, back to the lens. I did not create this model. Everything I just said I learned from my friend Peter Koestenbaum. He has a leadership consulting practice that's called Philosophy in Business. You can go to pib.net, I think is his website. If you Google Peter Koestenbaum on Amazon, he's got this great book, Leadership, The Inner Side of Greatness. I highly recommend it. There's a great Fast Company article about him out there. I can't say enough about how brilliant this guy is. And I guess just one comment on that. His consulting practice is called Philosophy in Business because he's trying to, you know, the philosopher is more like the visionary and the businessman is more like the reality guy. In business, people usually think that taking time to think about philosophical ideas means you're soft and you're not going to act fast enough to make decisive decisions. And Peter's whole practice is about saying, no, both of those things have a legitimate place in the workplace and in every aspect of your life. And if you just look at the history and the evolution of human thought, all of the tricks about how to find that balance are right there for you. So I think that'll wrap it up. I just want to say again, this is really fun and I really appreciate every single comment that you guys have left. In a couple different moments this week, I've said to myself, I'm gonna go reply to everyone, but there's too many. I don't think I can do that. But I've read everyone, and I really appreciate them, and it's fun to reply to them. And I hope you reply to my replies, and I'll try to keep that up. I really love the dialogue. When I used to have a blog at my old company, it was called Open for Debate. That was my little title because I just love hearing contrary opinions and having that opportunity to look at myself and be like, was I crazy? And then sometimes, you know, usually what it is, well, maybe you say, as soon as someone, you know, criticizes you, challenges you, disagrees with you, you have to train your mind to go, they might be right. Instead of our natural response, which is to be defensive. And there's a whole, people I've mentioned, Dan Ariely, with Predictably Irrational, he talks about that a lot. That might be another follow-up video too. But having this conversation, especially with people that have contrary opinions, is an opportunity to exercise that capability and to go, well, maybe I was wrong. I think I was probably right, and my confidence interval is somewhere between 1 and 99, you know? It's never 0 or 100, or it's always 0 or 100, depending on how you look at it. Okay, that was enough rambling. I might cut out some of that. But again, thanks for watching. And, you know, I said in some of the comments that we were going to get the Cook Nook breakfast video up, which we filmed this morning, but I think this one's going to be easier to edit, so it'll probably get up first. But don't worry, Cook Nook videos are coming. Don's open-faced breakfast sandwich will be the first installment. Thanks for watching, guys.